nice to see you again on this beautiful day. And this time with a quote by Justin Welsh, where he writes, "Modern luxury is the ability to think clearly, sleep deeply, move slowly, and live quietly in a world designed to prevent all four." So, in your opinion, how does moving slowly affect things?
Great to be here with you, my friend. And moving slowly is a way of being that can feel very foreign to me at times. And I think that it has many effects, but one of them is just our ease that we experience the world with. And our subjective experience, I believe, is significantly changed based off of whether we feel that we're in a rush and constantly sprinting from thing to thing to thing, and we're feeling this perpetual thirst for just a little bit more time or a little bit more things to squeeze in this tiny amount of time, versus a baseline level of ease and parasympathetic nervous system. And moving slowly, I believe, enables a greater flow and spontaneity in our way of being, and a fundamental receptivity to the things that present themselves in our regular days, where it's more natural at that pace to be aware, to treat this moment and what I'm experiencing in my senses as an end in itself, and to sort of drink in the present moment rather than constantly trying to shove in things into this present moment. And that slow movement, I think, is, once again, to me, it's something it's rare to be in that way of being, or it can feel foreign. I almost have more memories of moving slowly than I have actual habits of moving slowly right now. And it is a luxury. It's not something that all of us have, but it is, I think, a baseline for a present moment sort of meditative and enjoying and drinking up whatever we're seeing right at this second. My question for you is, how can we intentionally cultivate the capacity to think clearly when we're living in this current world? This second aspect that he talks about.
To think clearly and to move slowly and intentionally cultivate this aspect. Is what you said before reminds me of the Navy SEAL saying, "Slow is smooth and smooth is fast."
Mm-hmm.
It seems like oxymoronic, but actually it's a risk mitigation strategy in terms of if you are in a high-risk environment, like on the top of a mountain, and then left and right, you could fall down and there's a high risk of lethal things that can spun out of control. Then moving slowly is actually the much faster way to proceed. And in daily life, sometimes it's similar. Sometimes it's like a rush, and then we risk letting go of the most important things to us if we just rush through our day. So how can we intentionally cultivate then the capacity to think clearly? From your question, in my opinion, it's to try to turn down the noise. And noise, I mean like notifications, at least clear all notifications from your phone. And that's a good start. Okay, sometimes you lose connection with other important people, but maybe in a phase. And I believe that things are moving like in waves. Sometimes more of it, sometimes less of it, depending on your actual needs. And maybe take a walk in nature, or at the beach or in the woods, whatever, to tune in, and then cultivate the ability to think clearly. Block time for yourself, at least like maybe 3 times a week. Block 1 hour with specific question, and which you keep as a date with yourself, because you wouldn't turn down a date with someone you really like or you really value highly. You wouldn't just turn it down saying, nah, I don't feel like it. I just like to scroll a little bit more on the social media. You wouldn't turn down a date with someone else. So keep the date you create with yourself as well. And if you have this block of time scheduled for yourself, then your focused attention actually is the cultivation process of clear thinking. without any distractions. Remove the distractions first, but I found it quite valuable. It is the time in my week when I do it that provides me with the most kind of energy which comes only from within. I think about one thing and have some question and then write some things down and then the ideas flow. And I don't want to complete anything. I don't want to finish the question, whatever, but I want to open up the vast array of possibilities and the space of ideas with which I could attack this problem or provide a solution for the specific question I have asked myself. Maybe it's also a question which I never asked myself before, so it's like valuable thing to look upon because you give yourself the gift of a question which frames another perspective on the problem you now have. With that, in my opinion, cultivating means you block time in your calendar and keep the date with yourself. So what do you think? How could we actually intentionally cultivate our capacity to think clearly?
Excuse me. Yeah, I do think that that is a key aspect about it. I think that in general, viewing our mind as more similar to our body than we tend to culturally, in terms of there are real cause and effect. There are things that we do deliberately that are upstream of the quality of our mind. And to your point, on the slow is smooth and smooth is fast, I think that that applies certainly in entrepreneurship, that applies so abundantly clearly as it relates to our decision making that comes out of a slow, a deliberate, and clear mind versus a rushed and hurried and reactive mind. I can think of so way too many examples of when I was just in a hurry, I was sprinting from here to here and I was reacting and I made a decision that okay, we got to do this and we're starting this now and we're doing this. And then I put in a ton of work into this and then 2 months later I'm undoing the thing that I decided that we needed to do when I was rushed and hurried. This is where we can really waste a lot of energy if we aren't very deliberate and intentional about our decisions. And so, how to cultivate this clear mind really, it is a dance. It is a balancing act. We have this wetware in here, this 3 pounds of meat with a bunch of electrical signals, and every time we are every time we are dwelling on something, for one, we are wiring those things. Whatever you continuously contemplate becomes the inclination of your mind. And so I think that one aspect of this is to pay attention to the patterns of our thoughts and to see that, oh man, I'm bringing up this thing that I'm angry about again, or resentful about, or frustrated about. And maybe I need to be aware of that. Maybe I need to come to some conclusion about it, but I certainly don't need to be replaying what I'm frustrated with somebody else about at 9 p.m. for the third night in a row. This is where we are actually having a causal impact on clouding our minds. I think that another aspect of this, to your point, is this doing what we need to allow our minds to come back into balance. And for me, this looks like a meditation habit of some sort. This looks like managing my baseline dopamine, and this looks like a balance of solitude sprinkled into my life so that I can digest the things that have occurred and so that I can come back to a balance and a baseline. And so that balance of solitude and extroversion, that's one of the I think the key dials for me as it relates to coming back to this somewhat of a baseline of clarity of my thoughts. My next question for you is, given the messiness of real life, what are the realistic goals for these four abilities during our growth phases? And that being a clear mind, moving slowly, living quietly, and what was the fourth one?
Sleeping deeply, I believe.
Sleeping deeply, yes, maybe the most important of them all. So, what, given that we don't live in a perfect world and that we're doing this thing over here and that things ebb and flow, what do you think is realistic to set as a near-term goal for these things while we're in a growth phase? And then how does that differ from where we can ultimately orient ourselves toward in the long term, in the far future after we're in our growthy 20s and
Great question. And to your first part of the questions. You mentioned the phases, and yeah, we have to pay respect to the phases we are in life, actually. Not only like these 40s, whatever, but also kind of the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of the month, the week, or even the day. And depending on that, everything is in like a dynamic dance of things interacting with each other. Now, we traveled a little bit. I'm still on the road now. Sometimes I stay at the place for a longer time, sometimes I step a little bit faster. And I see for myself, okay, I cannot keep all the promises I make to myself in terms of having the aspirational goal of having a thinking time every day, because sometimes it's just an adventure day and I don't think much, I just experience. I find that's also totally fine, but in a realistic goal could be like 3 times a week, blocking the time on your calendar for thinking time to really think clearly about a question. Or like you said, getting into the habit of experiencing nature without distractions and inputs or that disturb your level of dopamine. Having some solitude, some meditation, or some prayer, whatever, helps you in rebalancing yourself towards a clear mind, where you ultimately have the ability with a clear mind to make better judgment and better decisions, especially for the decisions which have consequences which affect your life in a much larger way. So the more important your decision is, the more important it is that you make these decisions slowly and with a clear mind. And therefore also situational awareness depending on these. So this is a tool with regularity, but also a tool you can use in judging the importance of the phase of life or the thing you want to do, and how important it is to really think clearly about it. And so don't rush on important questions, but really take your time to cultivate a clear mind before you do it. And also with
And this takes awareness on what kind of a situation is this in front of me? Is this a situation where I need to absolutely honor this decision? And another aspect of this is it's surprisingly easy to be blind to when we are not thinking clearly. There's some ways that being in the state of the ego whipping us around in this cloud of cacophony of thoughts, that itself blinds us to the fact that we are not thinking clearly very often. And so, this underlying awareness, it's more difficult than you would think to even be aware that we are not currently thinking clearly. And therefore, now is not the time to force through a decision that's overly important and has long term implications.
for sure it needs awareness whether your mind is clouded or not. That's a very important point. It's the attention you give to a thing actually which determines how good the quality of the outcome of you handling the thing will be. And there's also another story which comes to mind when you say that, is in the book that I read. I forgot the title, but the story goes like this. It was a tuner for pianos, and he really was in a rush. But then he was in such a rush that he just said to himself, fuck it. I try to do this piano as slowly as I can possibly do it. So he went to the piano, just opened his tools, laid them out one by one, and tuned it bit by bit, as slow as he could possibly do it. And after that, he discovered that he actually did it much faster because he focused his attention purely on doing one thing after another. And with that, he was just much faster, so he had spare time to really put up with all his other contracts and tunings that he was meant to do. So this is the point where attention goes, your energy flows. And if you focus it to such a high degree, then your energy will move things without respect of time, actually. Dilate the time, actually. You will enlarge the space in which you do things if you focus your energy on one particular thing. But that said, it's not easy to do it. It's a simple idea, but it's not easy to do because The world around us is designed to provide us with distraction after distraction. And I wish I could be stronger in avoiding these distractions and focus my mind in a much more clear way. But at least scheduled thinking times help with that a lot, actually. And then half an hour time, I just focus on one question. And then the ideas come and flow. And that is really good. It's it's a dynamic thing. Life is sometimes chaotic, sometimes it's quiet. And if you risk nothing, then you also probably don't enjoy a lot because there's a rush in risking things. There's a rush in risking when you free dive. You see the beauty of the deep sea, but without oxygen. There's the risk of not breathing again, but you will manage that risk if you prepare yourself with that and try to manage these risks. So that risking it provides such an enjoyment. And if you remove all volatility from life, if you know how your next day and the next day and the day in 5 days will look like, where's the life in that? So sometimes you need stressors to really be able to be alive and stay alive. We are anti-fragile creatures. We sometimes need stressors. We need randomness in terms of keeping our health, a healthy mind, a healthy body, a kind of life where we
Yes.
can act on the challenges which life provides us.
You're so right, and that's a reason why with this target of wanting to move slowly, think clearly, sleep deeply, and live quietly, we shouldn't be too rigid and black and white and 100% about all of these for that very reason that we want to live fully in life. We want to take risks. We
Yes.
want to experience danger. We want to experience fully exerting ourselves. When we're going as hard as we can, we are very much not moving slowly. And so we shouldn't be attached to these things. We shouldn't cling to these things. And we should use awareness to come to the intuitive conclusion of what does this situation need from me? What am I meant to experience during this day or this season of my life? And so, therefore, my rule of thumb heuristics on these is to view them in terms of what is realistic, what is attainable, what should we be looking for these, knowing that we will never be 100% on living quietly, moving slowly, thinking clearly, and sleeping deeply. What can we do? What should we strive for? My unscientific rule of thumbs on this is that I do separate these out into two categories. So I think that thinking clearly, sleeping deeply, this is something that we should look for the majority of time across all seasons of our lives, but recognize that we will never be 100% in any season of our life. And so therefore, I think about sleeping deeply and thinking clearly in terms of 80%. I try to sleep fully and deeply 80% of nights. I try to have a clear mind and think clearly 80% of days. And I try to lay the foundation to think as clearly as possible for at least a chunk of 80% of days. In other words, I don't touch my phone before I do deep work, and I don't have any notifications on my phone in the mornings, and so that I can do my best work in the mornings. Then I look at, and the sleep thing, absolutely, for our health, for our performance, for our happiness, for literally everything in our life, the 80% of nights trying to get good sleep is a very, very worthwhile goal. However, if I never go and hang out with friends at 11 p.m., I would miss out on a lot of life experiences. If I never if I'm so attached to my sleep that I never do this and never do that, never experience this, I'm going to limit myself in my life by being rigid and inflexible. And so that 80%, but make that 20% for a good reason. This is, in my opinion, a good rule of thumb. As we're not too perfectionist, but we're honoring the source of our health and our energy. On the other hand, the living quietly and moving slowly, this is where I really draw a distinction between, are we in a growth phase of life or are we in a cruising altitude phase of life? Is this a sprinty phase where we're trying to build and we're trying to expand who we are and experience something new and push ourselves and challenge ourselves, which is very worthwhile. And I believe that everybody should have growth phases of their life and cruising phases of their life. I think during our growth phases, we should accept that there are sacrifices of living quietly and moving slowly. And maybe we try to restore ourselves in some weeks of the year or some weekends of the year, or we look to be intentional about being in this way during our evenings to restore. If we're an entrepreneur and we're trying to build a company, you need to do 10 times more than you need to do if you're just working a corporate job. You need to walk fast, you need to speak fast, you need to be very time efficient, you need to blow through 10 tasks in 20 minutes, and you do have to operate at a different level of performance and push yourself to a different level of performance. Go hard where you're not shy, you're not bashful. Sometimes you need to fight. And this is where that living quietly, moving slowly, sometimes it's just not the time or the phase in our life where that can be. But we also shouldn't go, maybe we need to go a few years without that being our default. Probably should not go 20 years without that being our default. So once again, we're looking for that balance, we're looking for that golden mean, we're acknowledging that there's trade-offs with these things, and we're recognizing that we shouldn't be completely attached to being one way all the time across all seasons. We should be using awareness to ask, what does this phase need from me? What is meant for me and how I walk my path right now? And a lot of times that is a sacrifice of this in order that this long-term thing can be true, or in order that we can become somebody who we weren't before, and we can gain capabilities and we can gain various forms of freedom through very difficult sprints. And so this is I would say, somewhat of the nuance and balance of, yes, this is the long-term thing. And when I have kids one day, you better believe I'm going to want to live quietly and move slowly. And I'm
Mhm.
going to want to be smelling the roses. I'm not going to be, if you really don't want to have your kid walk in, show you their drawing that they made in crayon, and you just be in a rush to get on to the next moment. These are when you want to soak in this experience and fully give yourself to this moment and enjoy it for as long as it lasts, because these moments will be precious. And of course, these moments are there with our grandparents before then, right now, etc. These are their this, these are their that. And so we should look to get doses of this even during our sprinty growth phases. But during the long run is where I really view this as, oh yeah, I know that I want to land there. Even if I'm not meant to be fully soaking in the moving slowly, living quietly during year 27 and 28 of my life. During year 35, during year 40, I would like to spend a lot of my time in this. And so
Mhm.
this is where I think during the long arc of our journey, this baseline levels here are right to be here at some points in the journey in some phases, here at some points in some phases of the journey.
That is awesome, yeah. Because you never know how long the moment will last. So a flower blooms and then decays again, but that's the beauty of a flower, because it's like only made for a little moment in time where it can spread its pollen and so on. And at which point in time is a flower a perfect? Because at any point in time, actually, it's perfect, because it needs all these stages to cycle through to get to a point where it blooms, get to a point where it smells beautifully, where it looks beautifully. And so, as you said correctly, as there's a distinction between the growth phase and the altitude cruising phase. And you also need the clarity of mind to judge whether it's like, now I need to push through, now I need to stretch, and it's painful, but I will grow. And with that growth, I will have a good foundation to experience the beauty of the flower the growth phase provides you with. So it's a beautiful heuristic, and I will think about that a few moments in uh, like 80% of the nights and 80% of the days. Try to sleep deeply and think clearly and live quietly and move slowly when you reach the point of altitude in which you can cruise, where you don't have to uh, try to build the plane as you start and as you are on the runway trying to cruise up to altitude. That requires a
Yes, exactly.
lot higher performance,
Yes.
a lot more effort.
Agreed. So I have one last question for you. So he says the world is designed to prevent all four. And I think we can sense a lot of ways in which technology and culture combine to make this very much swimming upstream to embody these four qualities. It's not the default, and the more time we spend around people, there's this gravitational pull of culture. Thought is contagious, mindsets are contagious, pace is contagious. However, there are advantages of the modern world too. So it's become less and less the default than ever, less and less the status quo than ever. But the modern world has presented new tools, new opportunities, and new ways that we can swim upstream smoother, even as the stream is getting faster in our face. And so, given that we are in this modern world and we can't wish the situation to be different, we can't wish that it would be more normal to embody these qualities. But we do have tools available to us to apply intentionality toward. What do you view as the most important strategies to take advantage of what the modern world has to offer to cultivate these qualities when it is far less the default than it has ever been?
Great question, man. Yeah, you said it. The tools which the modern world now provides are tools we can use as lever to propel our vision for the world forward. And therefore, I think the strategy, in my opinion, which is the most fruitful one, is first get to know thyself to a much deeper level. Like get to know thyself better, know what you. And then the idea of ikigai comes in, the Japanese concept of if you find your ikigai, then when you do that, you will have flow every point in time in your life. Because you do what you're passionate about, you do what the world needs at the same time, do what gets paid so that you can do it sustainably, and you do what you're uniquely good at, what you are made for to do. Do some self-reflection exercise and constantly try to map out where this kind of sweet spot, where every answer of the question overlaps, where the sweet spot may be, and experiment with that, like in a T shape. Have a broad range of knowledge, but also in some points go very deep, especially in the points where you think it is uniquely you and only you could provide this value for the world. And if you know yourself better, you also have better judgment about the vibe. So you feel other people in a different way, and you feel with whom you vibe or with whom you get along very well. There's this chuck a beer test. If you would chuck a beer, well, if you don't drink a beer, maybe chuck a drink with a guy, then it's okay. It's a good vibe. If you wouldn't, then just let it pass, let it slide. And it reminds me of Rick Rubin, my favorite producer, because he's also like this kind of philosopher and artist. He got asked one time, actually, okay, and you're a producer. Do you play any instruments? No, I don't have any technical ability whatsoever, he said. Okay, and then what do you get paid for? And then he answered something like, well, my confidence in my taste and my ability to express what I feel has proven helpful to artists. So, and this kind of confidence in your taste, this unique style you provide as maybe a catalyst for other people so that they can do their best work, for example, or even catalyst for interaction with tools so you can express yourself to the world in your unique way, is the strategy I would choose. And find your niche with that, in my opinion. Use tools as lever to express yourself into the world. And now I read something on Twitter, X formerly Twitter, step-by-step guide to vibe coding. Now, probably programmers will be the first profession completely, what is it called, like when AI does the work instead of you?
Displaced or replaced? Yeah.
Programming jobs will be probably the first jobs completely replaced by AI, because now you as a programmer or as a software engineer only have to envision the idea and then go step by step and just interact with the large language models, with the AI, to develop a clear step-by-step plan, and then you don't need any knowledge of coding whatsoever, but you have to have the confidence in your taste and the ability to express what you feel so that some product comes out of it which you can use. So, and this is the measure of actually any software team. Is it functional software? Functional software is the highest measure of our productivity. And therefore you have to create something which you love, which is functional, and yeah, with that, which is also beautiful. This is the thing. Now you can do vibe building, vibe coding, in terms of you express yourself through your vibe and let the tools as a lever help yourself putting this expression into the world, bringing it into the world, into the hands of the users or into the hands of people who enjoy that. And what is your how we could like lever in a modern world use the tools
Yeah,
to
it's a good thought starter. And where my mind goes first is just very tactically. I think that given that all of us are carrying around a distraction device at all times with infinite potential, the settings on our phone is something that we can deliberately decide once that will then just be the default for how often we're getting interrupted by these things. And so, very, very tactically, I recommend setting a thought out schedule on your phone where it doesn't have any notifications coming to you certainly during the time when you're trying to sleep, but also probably during the evenings, as well as no notifications ever for 90% of apps. There should never be a time when somebody liking your post on Instagram pings you and distracts you from what you're currently doing, for instance. And a lot of badge and push notifications are just completely counterproductive to living with a clear mind. And so I think that being extreme on our phone settings it is a tactic that is quite important. I think also just in
refers
taking
to the
advantage.
point
Yeah,
of Nir Eyal in his book Indistractable. He calls it hacking back, actually. Using your phone to hack back, to not be hooked again.
exactly, exactly. And then depending on some of these they sound fairly weird to a lot of people, but for me, I find that the most extreme dopamine traps of apps, which can be social media apps or dating apps or a few other types of just like constant dopamine drip, turning on black and white filters so there's no color actually mutes a lot of the dopamine effects of this. So if you want to say, I really want to keep in contact with my friends, but I'm concerned that I have an addiction in my habits to Instagram or whatever, that actually is a surprisingly useful tactic in terms of dulling the effect of some of these dopamine traps. And then beyond just reducing the minimum, looking for the positive, what I am frequently reminded to be grateful of is there are incredible tools now available on our phone that can enable us to learn and to manipulate our habits and to manage our energy better than ever. For me, I find that audiobooks are a great example where 100 years ago, I never could have read 3 to 5 books a month while I'm just doing my chores or driving places or whatever. Now we can consume so many more books than we could in the past without just sitting still in a chair for 3 hours a day, which is incredible. Another is we have some apps on our phones that can help us to connect with, for instance, connect with nature. All Trails is just amazing for for this reason. To enter flow states, Brain FM is incredible to manifest flow states during our work and to focus, and even sleep frequencies are great with that. And then Wim Hof method is amazing for breath work. Once again, it's just a lot of these things. You reduce the friction and increase the probability that you will maintain these habits by using these really effective technologies that are apps on the phone, as well as the Down Dog Yoga app is incredible at making a yoga habit far less frictiony, far more sustainable. And so these things, they're on the phone, and a lot of us are allergic to paying $5 a month for an app. Then we kind of have a compartmentalized view of this, but actually having a small budget for some of these things that are specifically geared at giving us healthy habits and good energy, these are good opportunities of the apps. And then the last thing I'll mention is you'll be shocked to hear me bring up artificial intelligence is ChatGPT is incredible at several things. One, you can learn anything so much faster by using these things and dialoguing back and forth with them. Two, when you run into problems and your brain is confused, turning on a life coach GPT, brain dumping back and forth, and helping it bring you out of your unclarity when you're in your moments of least clarity. Incredible, incredible tool to be able to talk back and forth with these things and to have it give you tactical guidance about what you should do this hour while you're swimming in confusion in your brain about whatever situation's going on. And then lastly, I would say as a learning tool, it is so powerful to use ChatGPT or whatever. Other AI tools are probably extremely useful and advanced, or are definitely extremely useful and advanced in the same way, in order to learn things faster, in order to broaden your conceptual map, in order to double click and think critically about, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And summarize this and bring in what this person would say about that. And how about from this perspective? And what if this happens? How does that counteract? And learning to interact and use these tools natively. So it's not just a book, but it's actually a thing where we can push around and play around and use dialogue to integrate it into our conceptual map. These are some of the ways that the technology is so powerful. And then the last one I'll mention, this call is a great example of, you do not live in the place where I live. And it is rare to find somebody that thinks like you. I don't know somebody that thinks like you in the place that I live, but I have the technological privilege of being able to talk with you over video across the world. And so I think that finding our tribe and being able to stay connected with the people that ground us and bring us closer to our higher self, this is another opportunity that technology presents us that was not available 100 years ago, when we really were beholden to the people that were right in our immediate vicinity as the only people that we had access to. And so being intentional about the conversations that we have on a regular basis, using this as methods to learn, and just recognizing that we're swimming way upstream, but we have these really powerful tools. And so it really behooves us to use these powerful tools to do the thing that is more difficult than ever, which is to live with a clear mind, to sleep deeply, to move slowly and live quietly. These are not the default, not easy, and partly not easy because of all these technologies and our culture that is partly shaped by these technologies. So we should use the power that these bring to our advantage wherever we can.
Definitely true. Definitely true. Find your tribe and also shape your environment. Your digital environment is a very big part of your environment in your life. So if you shape your environment, then you decrease the friction for the things you want to do, increase the frictions for the things that lead you astray, and then you'll have it much easier to follow through with what you designed and you want to do, actually. That's a great wrap up, a great summary of how we actually could use these tools and hack back to improve our mornings, to improve our habits, to improve our flow states, to improve our health and our connections with others as well. Thank you very much, Payne. What a great
Great
conversation,
talking to you, my friend.
as always, and see you next week. Appreciate you,
Yeah.
man.
See you next week. Enjoy your evening. Take care, brother.